Good morning, everyone. I welcome you all for today's presentation on oral mucositis, pain management in head and neck cancer by Dr. Raghu Asthota, who is Professor, Department of Palliative Medicine, Tata Memorial Hospital, Mumbai. I welcome you, Dr. Raghu. Please go ahead with the presentation.
Thank you, Poonam. I'm audible, right?
Yes, sir, you are audible.
Hello?
Yes, sir, you are audible, sir.
All right, I will go ahead. So thank you. Thank you once again for giving this opportunity to talk on your platform. So today I will be talking on oral mucositis pain management in head and neck cancers, which is a very commonest presentation during the ongoing active therapy of the patient who is presented with head and neck cancers. So whether he is receiving a chemotherapy or a radiation therapy or a combined chemo radiation therapy, this is almost the commonest symptom because of which there are a lot of problems the patient encounters, as well as we as the oncologists and oncosurgeons encounter during the treatment therapy. So we will along with all these nuances, what happens to the patient, how things go, what is the course and preventive measures and management. So slide. Yeah. So if you see the incidence of this is all okay?
Yes, sir, the slide is moving now.
Okay. So it's in a patient who is receiving chemotherapy, incidence of oral mucositis, or we also call it as a chemo-induced oral mucositis (CIOM), is about 30 to 40%, and it usually develops within a week or so. And it almost is, though it is a transient thing, it may be a very debilitating morbidity to the patient, and it stays for up to 4 weeks. In the patient receiving radiation, so the incidence is almost up to 90%. And if the patient receives a combined chemo radiation, or again it goes up to 90%. And if you see in radiation, it is very particular at that particular site where the patient is receiving radiation. For example, you're giving him a radiation to the neck, it will be at only in the laryngopharyngeal area rather than coming to the tongue area. But chemo-induced oral mucositis specifically develops at the buccal mucosa and the lateral aspects of the tongue. So, though it is very common, it can occur anywhere in the GI tract, but oral cavity is the commonest site. My slides are moving very slow, isn't it, Poonam?
Yes, sir. I think we can see the first slide after the introduction slide. It has not moved yet, sir, after that.
So now this is my third slide, the factors. These are the high-risk factors in general. So old age or female gender, the patient is having high body mass or more weight. If there is a reduced clearance of the drug and there is a genetic susceptibility to this patient, and certain specific chemotherapeutic agents, for example, 5-fluoro
I think Dr. Raghu's connection has some issues. I will just ensure that we can start it again. Please stay in the class. Dr. Raghu is joining back. Please wait for 2-3 minutes. You'll be joining.
Specialty clinics.
Hello. Hi. Sorry.
Yes, sir. Sir, you are visible, sir. Sir, please go ahead. Yeah.
Right? Okay. Now the slides are also moving faster. I think it got crashed maybe somewhere. But okay, no problem. Okay, so I think just start with the previous thing. Yeah. So 30 to 40% happens because of the chemotherapy, and almost 90% usually happens with chemo. It can occur anywhere in the GI tract, especially if you're giving chemotherapy, radiotherapy, because it is a site specific. It can happen, but the commonest site is the oral cavity when you're giving a chemotherapy. So there are certain factors which increase the risk of oral mucositis, and there are very specific factors like certain specific CT agents like 5-fluorouracil, or if you are using cisplatin or methotrexate, this group of medications, there is a high incidence that you may get oral mucositis in grade 3, grade 4. We will come to that, what is grade 3 and grade 4. And if you're using a combination chemo radiotherapy, then again the chances are very high. And if you're using a total dose of radiation to your buccal mucosa or your base of tongue, or if you're to your neck nodes, and if it is more than 5000 centigrade or 50 grays, then the chances increase, or if there are recurrent chemo radiotherapy given to the tube, the chances. And in general, old age, female gender, high body weight, if there is a reduced clearance of this chemotherapeutic medications, and also there is a genetic susceptibility. There is a certain group of patients with genetic susceptibility to getting the oral mucositis. So, in a nutshell, if you see this picture, very beautifully depicts how the oral mucositis develops with respect to the chemotherapeutic agents as well as with respect to the radiotherapy when you are giving. So, if you see, there are 5 blocks over here: 1, A, B, C, D, E. A is a normal tissue. You can see the blood vessels in the subcuticular area, and you can see your epithelial cells in the cuticular area. And now in B, there is an initiation phase, then there is an amplification phase, then there is an ulceration phase, and tissue reepithelialization phase when there is a recovery. So it is 5 phases. We talk it out like that. So when you are giving a chemotherapy or you are giving a radiotherapy, so there is a, as everyone knows, I'm not that expert what chemotherapy does and what radiotherapy does to the tissue cells. So everyone knows that it breaks the DNA double strands, and because of which there is a reactive oxygen species generation. Okay, so and there is a cell apoptosis, and when there is a cell apoptosis, because of this, there is a damage associated pattern molecules which are also released, and these ROS and DAMPs, what they do is that they activate the NF kappa beta mediated transcription cytokines. So what happens is that they stimulate this nuclear factor kappa beta cytokines, and in fact stimulates other cytokines like tumor necrosis factor alpha, interleukin 1 beta, interleukin 6, mitogen activated protein kinase. So there is a vicious cycle, positive vicious cycle, which keeps on happening, and because of which there is a lot of injury to the epidermal cells, and because of which there is a break. And when there is a break, it leads to ulceration. And over a period of this days, for example, after 3 to 4 weeks of receiving the chemotherapy, then there is a reepithelialization phase. So this is how the process happens, and this is what is the pathobiology or the pathophysiology of development of a oral mucositis. So why it is so important? So what is the clinical significance of oral? Okay, oral mucositis. So what can happen? So most important thing is that it is a very painful episode, a very painful phenomenon to the patient. They just can't open their mouth, they can't swallow, they can't even talk. So very significantly it affects the quality of life of these patients. And more importantly, because of this pain and because they can't swallow and because of very unhygienic oral care, it also affects the nutritional intake of these patients. So most of these patients, they don't eat and they become cachectic, they become susceptible to various forms of infections, all these things. So again, they are susceptible to infections. Two another important things which we have to remember is because of this debilitating morbidity, the chemotherapeutic dose is limited. So the next dose we either give 75% or 50% of the dose, or we may try to change the chemotherapeutic agent. So it leads to reduction in the next dose of chemotherapy. And also, when you are giving radiotherapy, it leads to interruption of the RT treatment because of this debilitating condition. So that's why this is the clinical significance of oral mucositis. And as our clinicians, our job is either we can prevent it, or even if it happens, we need to treat it. So what is the clinical course? So what happens, how it goes? So oral mucositis, it usually presents with erythema, usually just redness. So that is usually a stage 1, we call it as. But if it is not, if you don't take any preventive measures, or if we don't treat it, then it can lead to erosion and then ulceration. And when there is ulceration, it usually gets covered with a fibrinous pseudomembrane. And ulceration can lead to bleeding, many other complications, like the patient can't swallow and can't eat, all these things. So that's why it is important for us to treat it. Okay, so usually the lesions heal after 4 weeks of the chemotherapy or radiotherapy. But sometimes it may get complicated, because on top of it, if the patient gets a local infection, particularly the patient, most of our patients are immunosuppressed, then the duration may get prolonged. Rather than 4 weeks, it can go up to 6 weeks, or anything, it can happen, right? So what are the preventive measures we can take? Okay, so because we always tell them to have a oral hygiene, proper oral hygiene, that is very important. So we ask them to use, if you see in the OPD, we tell you use the baby soft bristle toothbrush rather than the hard or the medium bristles toothbrush, and we ask them to floss daily and also rinse with bland solutions. So this chlorhexidine and betadine gargles are not to be recommended in this group of patients. Okay, even the MASCC also says that, even your ISOO says that you should not recommend this group of drugs for rinsing. So you just have plain warm saline with a salt, 1 tablespoon of salt and half tablespoon of baking soda gives a good prevention to this, and soothing effect to these oral mucositis patients. Okay, and we can recommend it up to 2 to 4 times per day. Okay, most important thing is that preventive visit or prophylactic visit, we can call it as, towards the dentist is always very important, because a proper dental care, if there is a tooth caries or if there are sharp tooth, okay, those things need to be addressed. So that's why we always have to send it to a dentist. And the studies have shown that if you send them to a dentist, the incidence usually reduces, or the risk of mucositis reduces by drastically by 25%. Also, you can ask them to have a cryotherapy whenever they are taking a chemotherapeutic infusion in our GDC, general daycare or private daycare. So we can tell them to just put ice chips, because what happens when they put the ice chips, there's a vasoconstriction. So because of the vasoconstriction, there's a the toxic drugs which are there, they don't come to the epidermal layers and won't cause any damage to the mucosa. And there are certain mucoadhesive hydrogel rinses which I have not found in our Mumbai, so I don't know whether they are really available in India or not. We can also tell them to modify the diet, such as avoiding the starchy, acidic, and sharp foods. The sharp foods, I mean to say that the commonest sharp foods which we eat are the chips. Okay, because they are sharp, crispy. So whenever we chew, they can just damage your mucosa. Okay. Okay. We can also tell them to have a honey, swish and spit administered before radiation to decrease the incidence of mucositis, or also just you can tell them to put dexamethasone or morphine into that, and or local anesthetic into that, and tell them to do a swish and spit or gargles. So in nutshell, if you see the assessment of this prophylaxis or assessing the risk of mucositis and prevention of oral mucositis, the modalities, there are patient factors, there are disease factors. So the patient factors are, so you can't do anything about this age and female sex, but you can change. These are the modifiable factors like pre-treatment nutritional status, baseline oral hygiene, and you can stop them to have smoking. Disease factors, you really can't do about this, because these are all non-modifiables, but at least you can modify the dose of the therapy. But again, it depends on what medications you are giving, how aggressive is the disease, and all these things. And these are the various things which I already said. Now, if you come to see, there is something called as benzodiazepine mouthwash. This is a non-steroidal anti-inflammatory drug, and studies have really shown that it really helps rather than prevention, even in the treatment of oral mucositis when the patient develops. So there are various scales by which we can really categorize the patient that which stage of mucositis development they are into. Why is this important is that because a grade 1 and a grade 2, we'll come to that. Mucositis usually doesn't need an aggressive management, whereas a grade 3 and grade 4 needs an aggressive management of pharmacological therapy or in the form of admissions of the patients to the respective hospitals. So there are various scales. So the WHO scale, the ECOG scale, the commonest one is the common terminology criteria for adverse events, which is developed by the National Cancer Institute, which also gives about the severity measure scale of the mucositis. So coming to that, this is a very simple scale. The other scales are very complicated. Okay, and if you see that there are 5 grades, grade 1 is asymptomatic or mild symptoms, so interventions are not indicated. If you see grade 2, it's a moderate pain or ulcer that does not interfere with oral intake, so we just need to have a modified diet. If you see grade 3, there is severe pain interfering with oral intake. So from these grades, the patients need certain form of interventions from us, as well as aggressive pharmacological treatment, or if it is grade 4, they may need admissions. Okay, so that because if you see in certain group of patients, if, they are giving the hematopoietic stem cell transplant group of patients, not the head neck cancer patients. Okay, so they do a prophylactic PEG so that because they have almost around 90% incidence of developing a very grade 4 mucositis. So they feed not PEG, sorry, TPN, so they start a prophylactic TPN in this group of patients because they know that they won't be able to take food by mouth. So they always start a parenteral nutrition. So the World Health Organization toxicity scale, again, if you see the grade 3, grade 4, if you see this, so this is what I mean to say the grade 3, grade 4, which usually needs aggressive pharmacological management. So why I put this slide is very important because you also need to understand the differential diagnosis, not only of RIOM, you have to understand about the CIOM. So it is basically the same for both RIOM, CIOM. There's a chemotherapy-induced or radiotherapy-induced oral mucositis. So if you see, there are various differential diagnoses. So we have an aphthous stomatitis, we can have one herpes, we can have a gangrenous stomatitis, we can have acute necrotizing stomatitis. So the last two are basically because of the bacterial infections. Okay, and when there are bacterial infections, we just don't have a local presentation. We also have a systematic presentation in the form of fever. Okay, the patient may go into sepsis, and all these things we need to take care. Even the WBC count may become high. So if you see a chemotherapy-induced oral mucositis which is not infected, the WBC counts and all are not very high. Okay, so that's why a differential diagnosis of RIOM or CIOM is very important. So in management, if you see overview of management of the mucositis, it's pain control, nutritional support, oral decontamination, palliation of dry mouth, management of bleeding, and therapeutic intervention. So it is divided into 6 major interventions. So pain control. So how you do all these things, we will come to that step by step. So the management of chemotherapy-induced mucositis and radiotherapy-induced mucositis is almost similar. There are a few 1-2 things which I will highlight that. Okay. So always we have to begin with bland rinses and topical anesthetics. So we can also use a 2% viscous lignocaine, which is available easily in our market, and that is the best thing, but not to be given in a patient who is not having difficulty in swallowing, and only if he is in grade 1 or grade 2, you can still avoid this group of medications 2%. We can just ask them to have a warm saline gargles along with a half teaspoonful of baking soda. We can tell them to modify the diet, avoid the alcohol and tobacco, and if the patient is having severe pain, you can either give analgesics, oral analgesics, but the patient may not be able to take oral analgesics, he can't swallow. So then you can tell them to do a mouthwash. I will come to that magic mouthwash which we use in our institute. I will come to that. We put one more M in that, that is a morphine. So I will tell how we prepare that and all. And we can tell them to take almost 3 to 4 times a day. And that gives them a very good analgesic pain relief. If it is too severe, then we consider the patient for administration, admission, so that we can start them on systemic analgesics and also to start them on parenteral nutritions, because they are unable to take orally. So that is why it is very. So what systemic analgesics we use? We usually use IV-PCAs or transdermal formulations. Either of this group we can use. Chlorhexidine washes and other topical antimicrobials are not to be recommended. Okay, otherwise they just irritate and they can cause more pain to this group of patients. Even I said to you, even the radiotherapy induced oral mucositis, it is almost similar management, okay, compared to the chemotherapy induced oral mucositis. So this is what I was telling you about the magic mouthwash which we use in our institute. So what we do is that we take 500 ml of normal saline, we take syrup Benadryl, we take lignocaine and syrup Gelusil. Some institutes also use syrup sucralfate, but sucralfate is not actually recommended in chemotherapy-induced oral mucositis, but it is more recommended in a radiation-induced mucositis. I really don't know how it helps, why it is more in radiation-induced mucositis. There is no scientific got it yet. So I was just going through the literature. I could not get any scientific. But they say that it helps much better in a radiation-induced oral mucositis. So this is the magic mouthwash which we prepare, and we tell them the patient to have gargles 3 to 4 times a day, and we can add morphine 10 milligrams to make it morphine magic mouthwash. So this is what we do. So I'm not going into this MSCC guidelines, but overall, in a nutshell, if you see the management of mucositis, you have to assess and you have to find out the risk factors. Okay, you have to take the history, means because the patient may need an admission, so we really need to know his level of pain, the amount of intake he is really having, and is there any bleeding or not. All these things are very important, and if it is severe and complicated, we really need to admit him and start him on systemic opioids. The dehydration is, and the nutrition has to be taken care of in the form of IV modalities. If it is uncomplicated, mild or moderate, then we can just start him on bland rinses, 2% of viscous lignocaine, diet modification. Now, coming to that, I told you that there is some difference in radiation-induced mucositis. One was the sucralfate, and second thing is using the gabapentinoids, that is gabapentin. And many studies had shown that gabapentin, if we are using 300 milligrams OD and then over a period of 1 week BD, has really given good results in managing the radiation-induced oral mucositis. So this is how we manage. And if you see this, as the symptom burden increases, so the treatment modalities increases. So initially, if the symptom burden is not just bland rinses helps, then if it is not well controlled, then you can go to viscous lignocaine. Not well controlled, then you follow the rest of the things. So in summary, it is very clinically important, and it is important because it sometimes causes dose limiting complications of cancer therapy. It is painful and affects the nutrition of the patient, and that's why also affects the quality of life of the patient. The pathogenesis is multifactorial and complex. And clinical management of the oral mucositis is largely focused on palliative measures such as pain management, nutritional support, and maintenance of good oral hygiene. And several promising therapeutic agents are in the developmental phases, specifically the growth factors in the form of palifermin and repifermin, especially the palifermin, which is a US FDA approved medication. So it enhances the growth factors, and because of which the regenerative process of the mucosa is increased, and it heals very fast. So palifermin, I don't know whether it is really available in India. And there are certain antioxidants in the form of amifostine, which can be used to promote the growth of the epidermis or the mucosa. So these are the promising therapeutic agents which are upcoming. Thank you very much. And for any queries, you can reach me on my WhatsApp directly or email me or tweet. Thank you. And I'm sorry for the technical glitches. It is real time.
No, thank you, sir. It's I think that's a part and parcel of our Zoom classes, and many times we all have gone through the same. Sir, so I think that was an excellent class, and I think this is one of the important topic which is often overlooked in our routine teaching to our residents, and in fact, as a faculty also, when you are not dealing with it directly, you may not be well aware of these various kind of presentations, grades of mucositis, and their treatment. So I think there was one question, sir. If you can take that, that there was a question that.
That's what. Magic mouthwash. I told that.
Yeah.
500 ml we take. I already mentioned that 500 ml of normal saline, we take 50 ml of Benadryl and 50 ml of lignocaine, and then we put additional M, that is a morphine, 10 milligrams in that.
Yeah, I think they wanted to ask you put everything together like a mixture, yes, and then you use it.
Yeah, that is what we put everything.
Yeah.
I think I answered Dr. Loknath Sau's question.
Anyone else want to? Yeah, I think so. Another question, please.
Yeah, from yeah. So what we can do is that, see, yeah, I totally agree. See, any exercises or physiotherapy, if you really want to do, and if the patient is in severe pain, they just can't do that. So you have to first tackle the acute crisis. So the acute crisis is that acute pain. So that is what I'm saying. So in this group of patients, we can also give. That's what I said. If the patient is admitted, yes, we can give systemic, that is IV opioids, because opioids are the drug of choices in this group of patients. And if he's able to swallow, then we really don't need a strong opioid. So even a weak opioid in the form of tramadol can do wonders in this group of patients. Or if the patient is having severe, and if the patient severe mucositis, and if he's having NGT tube, then we can give tablet formulations of morphine through that, and that really cuts down the pain. And when they're going for exercises, you have to remember one thing is that this is an volitional, I will say this is a voluntary induced breakthrough pain, because the patient knows that he's going for an exercise. So you can just pop in one pill through the NGT if he's having an NGT, and he can go for the exercises. So he has to really pop in that pill 15 to 20 minutes before that. So how often we have to use that daily? That means I said, yeah, we can use it 4 times a day.
Yes, sir. So I think, sir, over the, I think the another important point which I think we should bring to notice to all our residents is that I think this care should start from the day the patient enters the hospital. I think it's not only the the post-operative period. It should be started from the pre-operative. In fact, when we start seeing the patient. So why I'm saying is that because this maintenance of oral hygiene and along with the dental care, we have to start as early as possible.
That's
and I think that
the dental reference is very important in this group of patients. We have to always send this patient for, because in oral, any head and neck cancer, if you see, almost 95% of the patients have a poor dental hygiene. Forget the oral hygiene, the dental hygiene itself is so poor. At least in India, it is very poor. So I think
I totally agree, sir. Yeah, and again, this is one of the most overlooked thing which we usually don't think that much, because the concentration is all on the disease. So that again is a message that all of us should be.
So you can give us an early palliative care reference, and we are always there to help.
Correct, sir. So I think there is one more question, which is the best transdermal patch we can use for pain relief in these patients?
Yeah. So see, any transdermal patch we are using. So there are only 2 transdermal patches of opioids which are available in India at present. So one is the fentanyl, the second one is buprenorphine. Now we always use fentanyl because you use either fentanyl or it usually takes 12 hours, minimum 12 hours to show its action. Okay, so the best one I usually advise to all is always start with a fentanyl. But before starting a transdermal fentanyl, one more thing we have to remember is that we really don't know how much dose the patient is needing. Okay, so when these transdermal patches were introduced, the dictum was that first you should know the 24-hour morphine requirement of this patient, and then you convert the morphine equivalent to the transdermal fentanyl patch. So that is how it is. So usually the patient, if he is reading around 30 milligrams of morphine per day, we usually go up to 12 micrograms per hour of the patch, the fentanyl. And if he is needing almost up to 60 milligrams to 90 milligrams of the morphine, we give 25 micrograms patch. So if you ask me, because I am, there are certain practitioners who directly start the patient on patches, but I usually don't do that. I usually see by giving at least a day or two, I see how much morphine is receiving, and then I convert that.
Yes, sir. So it means that first, the way you said is you assess the requirement of the morphine, and depending upon that,
yeah,
you titrate the dose.
Yeah.
I think that is the way you said. I think the another question is BG paint again.
So that's what I just exposed this slide now. So this is the BG paint which we have: glycerin, metrogil, doxycycline, and fluconazole. So 3 times a day we can put over the pseudomembrane, or if it is an exposed ulcer.
So if there are any other questions, please be free to post them.
Or else you can WhatsApp me anytime, no problem.
Yeah. So I think with this we conclude today's presentation, sir. It was an excellent presentation, and like I said, we really got to know so many important aspects of mucositis, their impact, their grades, and their actual impact on the management of the patient. So thank you so much, sir. I look forward to have again you in our this series of Saturday lectures.
Always.
Thank you so much, sir.
Yeah.
So I think one more.
I told Loknath how often that mix I told him around 3 times you can use it.
Sir, I think there's one more question.
Yeah.
If you
how
mind.
you continue these measures with magic mouthwash? See, the magic mouthwash is usually given for pain relief. So as long as the patient has pain, you can continue it. And I'm telling you, usually the RT induced, even the chemo induced oral mucositis, after 4 weeks, they usually subside. Unless and until if it is there is a super added infection, then it may go on up to 6 weeks. Otherwise, by 4 weeks, 3 to 4 weeks, they usually subside.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.